Our next speaker is Parag Patankar, an experienced enterprise software executive with over 15 years of proven results in business value-based product positioning, product management, and managing new product development. An alumnus of IIM Ahmedabad, he is today the Senior Director, Industry Strategy and Insight at Oracle. Parag will share with us insights from his vast experience on scaling up product management function. Ladies and gentlemen, Parag Patankar.
Thank you very much. So you've seen what happens I do demos, and these blow-ups happen all the time. So famously, Bill Gates actually did demos with like completely rigged up stuff. I think I should take a trick or two. So I did try to minimize tech glitches by using a PDF file, which hopefully would have been the most portable format, but apparently not. Anyway, so way back in the last millennium, since I've been introduced as a vastly experienced speaker, blah, blah, I was a newly minted graduate from IIM Ahmedabad, and I can see Shiv Negi there in the audience, a batchmate of mine. Shiv, okay, don't rat on me. So I was full of myself. I joined a small startup as a product manager. And 15 days later, my grandfather was visiting me. And so he said, so Parag, now that you have this fancy degree, what are you going to do? So I said, I'm going to be a product manager. He said, oh, production manager, that's great. Your dad was a production manager too. And I said, no, not a production manager. He said, okay, fine. Maybe you'll do something useful. So you're a manager, right? How many people do you manage? I said, nobody. This was a small startup. I was employee number 9. So anyway, so he said, oh, maybe you're growing and you'll hire people to work for you. I said, not in the foreseeable future. And he was a pre-independence British days trained lawyer. He kept grilling me relentlessly. 20 minutes later, he said, my dear boy, you know what? Either they are grooming you to become the CEO, or you are setting up yourself to become a big fool. 16 years later, nobody has asked me to be the CEO as yet. So I occasionally make a fool of myself going around making talks about product management. So having said that important thing that Puneet also spoke about, so he said he would rather not have a mediocre product manager than have one. So people who are familiar with Nassim Taleb's books would know of a concept of mediocristan and extremistan. Product managers come from extremistan. So the difference is mediocristan is everything is averaged out. So things like your height or weight all conform to typical bell curves, mediocristan. Extremistan is distribution of wealth. So for example, if you look at, so probably the first row is founders, and then there's the rest of us. So you can see the wealth distribution is very disproportionate. And so, yeah, but don't lose heart. A lot of you, unlike me, are not salaried slaves, so you'll make it big one day. So extremely critical point. So hire the smartest and the best people you can. Otherwise, don't hire. There's no use. Actually, there's a negative use of having a bad product manager. So before we get into how to scale the product management function and what product managers do, let's first look at what product managers are not. A very important point, especially in the Indian context, since we still have a very evolving product ecosystem. So the first thing to keep in mind is just because you're okay, so Kundan Shah made this really rip-roaring comedy called Jane Bhi Do Yaro about 20 years ago, one of my favorite Hindi movies. And so he's coming up with a new one called P Se PM Tak, where a member of the oldest profession of the world goes on to become the head of the second oldest profession in the world. And that sort of raises eyebrows in the social context. But in our industry, when a programmer says, I'm a stud programmer, I'm going to be a great product manager, nobody raises eyebrows. And that's disaster. I'll give you a live example. The fast-growing Indian company, I won't name them. So they have issues with people management and their HR software. It's a custom-built solution. They had a small vendor build. So they said, okay, we're going to do a world-class HR solution. And so they invited bids and, of course, Workday, SAP, and Oracle bid. I know this from my Oracle days. And so during the final meeting, the head of HR says, yeah, all that is crap. We really don't need your product. We just need your schema and your API. We'll build the software ourselves. Now, this is a company that has made a complete hash of their HR practices, don't know how to manage outsourced vendor, yet they want to go ahead and build their own HR software. Guess why? Head of HR is the ex-head of engineering. So all he knows is, I know how to code, give me the schema, give me the API, you're golden. Pretty bad idea. The second thing is, so PA se PM tak aa gaye. Now there's three kinds of PMs in the Indian context, and there was a question raised to Puneet earlier in the morning. So how does project management and how does program management fit into this? Let's spend a couple of minutes looking at that. So project management typically is a small engineering drive aimed at delivering something of value to a single customer. So fairly limited in terms of scope. So scope creep may happen, but it's the customer's call. So the project manager's main kick in life is making this particular customer happy, and that's what he should do. Program managers typically manage large programs which are aggregation of projects. But again, very different beast from product management with one exception. So Microsoft does a lot of product management function, calling it program management. So again, they had a reason for evolving it that way. We'll leave it there. Then there's a lot of stuff we hear now about Scrum, Scrumban, agile development, customer development, and one of the things that's coming out of that is this role called the product owner. And a lot of people get confused about product management and product owner. So the product owner is a very small subset of the product management function. So again, let's not confuse what the PO does versus what a full PM does. And so we'll talk a little bit more about the distinction. So let's look at how we grow and scale PM. So again, a question raised in the morning about what's the right time to get a PM on board. And a lot of things that Puneet said resonated with me. So I wish I had heard his talk before I had locked down my slides today morning. So absolutely the same thing. So if you're a startup, even if you're not a startup, it's a business concept or an idea that's in the mind of the business process owner. So in a startup, typically that's the CEO who's trying to save, if not save the world, at least do something that adds value to a set of customers. He ideates it, he or she takes it a little further down the road. At that point, you need to get a formal PM. So in the startup world, Puneet said, good idea is wait till you have some seed funding, you're not overly worried about running out of cash. Even in the enterprise fat cat space, companies like Oracle, even if you have a new idea, it's not necessarily that idea should be staffed by a PM right away. So what's the time when you bring the PM on board? For that, let's step back and take a little history lesson. So product management owes its genesis to the consumer products industry, and particularly P&G. So it was in 1931 that Neil McElroy, a young advertising manager, first floated this idea in a one-page memo. So Amazon has this thing about writing memos. This actually is idea that Bezos took from P&G. So a one-page memo that crisply articulates what you're trying to do. So this guy said, for each of our products, there's a clutch of people who are working around it. So people who do the concept, people who do the selling, distribution, so on. But there's no single point of contact who's responsible for the success or the failure. And as Puneet rightly said, success has 1,000 fathers, failure is an orphan. In the PM context, failure is on the head of the PM. So you have to be extremely brave if you want to venture into this world. So this idea caught on, so he called this the brand man, and so P&G actually invented the brand manager role. And that's continued through, and it was exactly 50 years later that Scott Cook, the founder of Intuit, quit P&G, and he was in a brand manager's role, and founded Intuit, and brought a lot of those practices of getting insights from the customer into the product development cycle. So the whole buzzword that we hear about customer empathy, walking in the shoes of the customer, a day in the life of the customer. We all owe a lot to the consumer products companies that have brought it in. So once you have the idea at a minimum viable product stage, that is when you need somebody to take it by the neck and take it through. And as Puneet said in the morning, if you have to sweep floors, so be it. So in the first startup, in the first year I was working, the end of the year in my review, I had listed out the stuff I did. And so one of the things was just making sure that we were 15 people by then, making sure that I order food from the nearby dhaba before he shuts down, because we were pulling all-nighters. And my boss looked at it and said, Parag, why are you doing this? I said, if I didn't do this, all these boys would go home and you wouldn't see them again. So you have to do some things. You have to do, should I be catering manager full time? No. And he rightly called it out. But yes, and there's plethora of things you need to do. So that's the minimum viable product stage. Then the product takes a life of its own. It starts growing. And at the growth phase, the product management function. So again, this is function. The person may be a single person. It may be multiple people depending on the size of the organization, the way it's structured, and the size of the product. So once you get to the growth stage, the product is sort of quasi-stable. A product never stabilizes till it dies. Then it's a rip. But when it's at the growth stage, now the next big role that you bring into the product management function is product marketing. So essentially what you need to do is train your sales force, create collateral. So Chaitanya made an excellent point about creating demo videos. So if you are a product manager who's got his nose to the grindstone, just cranking the product out and making it stable and building features, you have no time to do this. So you get in the product marketing person, and or at least carve out time from your product management function to do this. As the product matures, significant revenue traction comes in. That's where you do a three-way split. So there's product strategy. What happens in mature products is they become sacred cows. So some things cannot be touched. So if you want to make radical changes, you have to get buy-in right up to the CEO level. So that's where the product strategy function comes in. So talking to analysts, talking to the CXO level, and then getting their buy-in for the product roadmap. Product development role is the role that we're all familiar with in terms of product management. So writing out the specs in detail, working with engineering, back and forth on the design, and then there's of course the product marketing role. I'll give you a tangible example of how this grew in the current product that I was managing at Oracle. So in 2007, our SVP, so again, so the CEO is a placeholder here. It's basically the person who wants to solve a particular business problem. So Oracle has this team of consultative solution selling experts. So they're all MBAs from HBS, Chicago, and so on, and ex-McKinsey, Boone, Booz, Bain, and all. And so they go, they sell to GE and Bank of America, and life's good. Our SVP turned it around, and so we had about 100 people doing this. Our SVP turned it around and said, look, we are going mid-market now, we are expanding, and you have to do a deal with Nigerian Airways. If you fly in a consultant who's based in Zurich, and the deal profitability is gone, sometimes, you may be even revenue negative in some of these cases because you're trying to get into a market. So we've seen large enterprise deals where discounts would be like, you start the negotiation at 97% and customer says 99%, and we say, chal, teri nahi, meri nahi. 98.8. So how do you scale the value selling function so that all your sales and pre-sales people can do it yourself? And so our SVP took up the challenge. I was in a line product management function building the Oracle Contact Center product, so probably I must have competed with Chaitanya at some point. They brought me in one person. So I created an MVP idea. I was given 2 developers. We started building from there. First 2 years, as Chaitanya said, you build it and they come, yeah, they do, but it's very slow. Even in a large organization where the head of sales is beating all the salespeople, all the salespeople react to is, how is my bonus going to look at the end of the quarter? Unfortunately, I had no way of linking the bonus to what I was doing at that point. So traction came, then we added a marketing person to train salespeople in various geographies. Now it's a team that, so I do mostly strategy work. I have 5 PMs doing development work and 2 people doing product marketing. So, but the context is now this is delivering about $400 million worth of revenue impact to Oracle every year. So it's a fairly gigantic product. So you can see the scales are very skewed. So PM teams need to be very lean as far as we can manage. So when you have a very lean team, how do you make that team work? The key thing is you have to believe in the function and you have to empower and enable. So in Extremistan, it's not about scaling by numbers. So when I started thinking about scaling, the first thing that came to mind is, okay, do they expect me to tell you how do you hire and train an army of product managers? That's not the point. The point is, how do you get the right people into the product management slot and then empower and enable them to deliver compelling value to your user base? The way to do it is you have to get top management buy-in. And so they say it takes a village to raise a child, but the mother's role is key. Similarly, it takes a whole ecosystem of people to make a product successful, where it's the product manager who holds this at the core. And to do this, the product manager has to cohesively work across all these functions. And when you say a buzzword like cohesion, the first thing that comes to mind is conflict. And conflict is inevitable. I'll give you some examples. So roadmaps, notoriously difficult. So what happens is salespeople go, they're trying to pitch to a large account. They know their year's quota will be done if they close this. So whatever the customer asks for becomes the thing that should go into the product roadmap. Salesman B has the same idea. So we were doing this product roadmap review a day ahead of our meeting with our VCs, again in the startup. And the head of sales started beating up on me saying, yeah, this roadmap makes no sense at all. I've got these 3 customers and these are the things that you need to do. We are falling behind the competition. I can't sell with this level of product. And so I was trying to defend myself the best I could. The CEO listened to this for a while. Then he stepped in and said very quietly to the head of sales, look, the reason I have a highly paid head of sales and a highly paid sales force is because I know the product is still evolving and is immature. If we had the best of breed functionality and we had the customer attraction, I wouldn't need you. All I would need is our office boy Ram Pratap and the fax machine. And so you can see how old I am. So we used to actually use fax machines to get orders way back then. So my son read the talk track and said, what's a fax machine? Why couldn't they just email images? And so there you are. So again, so top management buy-in and belief has to be there. Conflicts with engineering, inevitable, will happen all the time. So I joined in, and this was 99. Most people didn't know product management. So strapping Jat engineer Bhupinder Singh. So second day of my being there, he says, "ये साला अपने आप को technical समझता है." So I abided my time, And so then we were working on a very critical answering machine detection algorithm. And so I have a degree in telecommunications engineering as well. So I actually worked and cracked some of the puzzle on that. And that earned me the respect of the engineering team. So very critical thing is sales can be bludgeoned by top management, engineering cannot be. So smart engineers will do what they want to do. So you have to earn their respect. Very critical thing. Now, even having earned their respect, it's not necessarily they'll agree with you. So this example comes from my Oracle days. So I had written out this brilliant spec, and I was going into a review, and we had a product architect who's ex-Russian rocket scientist, so PhD in maths and true rocket scientist, defected, lives in Hawaii. And so visualize Wally and Dilbert. So all he would do is just sabotage you. And IQ off the charts. There's no way I could neutralize him. So I squirmed this, that, nothing worked. So my spec went down the drain. And luckily I had a senior colleague, so I went and spoke my heart out to him. And he said, Parag, it's unlikely you will win this guy over. You just have to figure out how to manage him. So the technique then I used was I created a one-page memo like the PNG memo. Instead of showing the full spec to the architect, I floated the one-page memo and said, this is a very hazy idea in my mind right now. Can you help me clarify it? So he gave me some points, and then I gave him the same spec. This was a different product. I gave him the same spec without any alteration and said, yeah, all your feedback is here, sir. And he said, oh yeah, good job, Parag. So this is sort of the, it may be trickery, but it's the EQ tricks that you have to learn to carry people along in the ecosystem. So Puneet talked a bit about this as well earlier in the morning. So the PM is a very tricky beast, and it's very context-driven role. So it's a set of paradoxes all the way. So product managers have to have a lot of authority, but there's no line authority. So most of the time, engineering or pre-sales or sales don't report to product management, yet they have to get everybody's buy-in and take them along if the product has to be successful. Now they have to show thought leadership, yet there are so many smart engineers who are just waiting to sink whatever bright idea you come up with. So thought leadership has to be traded off with not trying to be the smartest guy in the room. So tread softly, get their buy-in, get things going. You have to be very data-driven to make decisions that are unambiguous, yet you have to have a tolerance or rather love for ambiguity. Often enough, there are situations where you won't have all the data you need for making your decisions. So you have to take a call based on limited data. So there's not argument for not getting hold of data, but working with whatever data you have and hope you made the right call and iterate quickly. Last thing is, product managers have to be fiercely independent, yet they have to build consensus. So they have to carry the whole ecosystem along, yet they can't give in. So you can't please all the constituents. So very tricky function, but at the core, what is product management all about? It is about being the customer champion in the organization. Your role as a product manager is to be the spokesperson or the champion of the customer. Understand what the customer values and then drive it into the organization's agenda to build it out. And so they say the customer is always right or customer is king. But then it leads to some things to think about. So Sundays our cook is usually off and I am the man on duty in the kitchen. So last Sunday I was planning to make an omelette. My son came in after playing football. He said, no, let's do pizza. And my wife came in a bit later and said, nope, it has to be a salad. And so you can see differing customers, differing requirements. So which customer is right, when, why? So in the office, of course, I mean, nobody listens to PMs. So at home I said, I will pull rank and do it my way. So I looked my son squarely in the eye and I said, look, whoever is the boss of the house gets to decide. And then quietly I said, yeah, it's your mom, whatever she said stands. So it may seem like a trivial point, but it's very important. So I'll give you a concrete example. So we were building mobile field service applications at Oracle, and we had a disparate set of customers. So we were building out the next version, and one of the changes that was requested by multiple customers was increasing the density of information, and these were all handheld devices in 2003, 2004, well before Android and iOS came. It was all Palm OS and early stages of WinC, extremely crappy OS, very buggy pain to deal with. And so the request was essentially putting more of the customer's service data onto the screen so that the engineer who's servicing this request has all of it when they visit the customer. We said, sounds like a reasonable request. We baked it in, did some alpha testing, went into beta. And so we had a customer, Canon Singapore in Singapore, and they just loved it. And so we said, okay, we're good. And we launched it. And one of our other big customers, Scottish Water, immediately raised an escalation saying that, what the hell have you done to this product? And we were surprised. I mean, why would somebody not want to see more information on the screen? And so I pushed back a little bit. A few weeks later, I was scheduled to travel to Europe to meet some of our customers. And I decided to go down and meet Scottish Waters in person. So I was, this was a mid-April day, so warm by Edinburgh standards. I was shivering to death. So one of the engineers kindly agreed to take me out in his service van. So we went and located a break in a pipe on a hillside. And so then I had my aha moment. The guy was wearing extremely thick gloves. Obviously, I mean, you're working in sub-zero temperatures most of the time. It's very hard to hold a stylus, and this was before touchscreens, so, and accurately do tuck, tuck, tuck on a dense screen. Contrast this with Canon Singapore. The engineer typically spends his entire day in a single vertical building, and the building density is such in Singapore that sometimes buildings have individual zip codes. So very protected, very insulated environment. So obviously, I mean, air conditioning, good ambient lighting, GPRS always works. This was well before 3G. So very different kinds of customers. So we need to realize two things. So one is you can't please everyone all the time. And second, you have to have a decision-making framework that allows you to make these decisions in a fairly scientific manner rather than saying, okay, I think this customer is important. So if you take back the metaphor of kings, so all kings are not equal. So some kings are more equal than others. So same way with customers. So you have to decide what segment you want to go after and then prioritize your roadmap based on that. So some of the frameworks that have been very useful, so one is voice of the customer. So as we said, the customer's champion in the org is the product manager. And so voice of the customer and then QFD, which translates those customer requirements into engineering requirements and does the matrix for the trade-off. It's a very powerful technique if used wisely. Again, the advent of agile development methodologies and lean have also helped the product management function in allowing us to make point releases, deliver things faster. Cloud has made it even easier. Now, one thing that I want to clarify here is sometimes people say, with the role of the PO in agile development environment precludes him from speaking to a lot of customers and doing VOC kind of stuff. That's not true. So way back 15 years ago, to do VOC, we would run customer surveys and get data. Typically, it would take weeks or months to get that data in, analyze it, do something about it. Now, in a cloud environment, whatever your customers are doing is completely visible to you. So as the product manager, you need to go in, grab that data, make sense of it, and keep tweaking the product as fast as. So these frameworks are very useful, very important. So way back in 97 in my OB1 class in B school, I read a term which is the map is not the territory, and I didn't understand a lot of stuff I studied at IMA that time. So a couple of months back, I was on a 600-kilometer cycle ride, and at about the 120-kilometer mark, there's a sharp descent. So I'd been riding for about 6-7 hours by then. This was middle of the day, blazingly hot. I was desperately looking forward to that sharp decline. And what I had not realized is there was a series of small ups and downs and a small climb just before the decline started. And that literally killed me in the afternoon heat. So the map is not the territory. The point here is models and frameworks are great. They are heuristics to help us make decisions, but don't get enamored by them. So as George Box famously said, essentially all models are broken, but some are useful. So think wisely and apply them wisely. Same applies to whatever I have spouted today, so take it with a pinch or a bag full of salt. Hopefully there's a nugget or two that you found useful. So I'll stop here and take questions. Thank you.
Yeah, someone there, can we have a mic, please?
Yeah, could we dim the lights, please?
Hi.
Yeah.
With your vast experience, like, what do you feel when you see PMs who are like having just 2 years of experience, or like a fresher being a PM? What do you feel when you see young PMs?
Okay, so see, the vast experience part is just sort of context that you pick up. So I don't think there's a rule that says you have to be vastly experienced to be a good PM. I think the critical things, and again, Puneet spoke about it in the morning. So very high degree of intellectual curiosity, intellectual stamina and perseverance to sort of track through, understand that problem and go to its depth. Understanding what your customers want, and sometimes this is where the context comes in. So there's a lot of noise out there. So how do you filter the noise? So signal to noise ratios are extremely critical. So this is where those mental model comes into the picture. So building your filters so that your signal to noise ratio becomes as high as possible would be the key. Places where I've seen product managers doing really well out of the box would be products that have smaller customer sets and very well-defined requirements. As you grow the customer base, the tricky part is triaging the number of customer requests or feedback data points that you get in and synthesizing it. So again, critical point. So in our educational system, we teach a lot of analysis. Unfortunately, we don't teach synthesis. And synthesis is a very important art for a product manager. So getting disparate data points, creating a coherent mental picture, and then selling that picture to stakeholders who will make the investment decisions to build your product.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other question? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Gaurav Sada. I'm Senior Product Manager with PayPal. So in India, from product management perspective, now it is fairly well recognized. When I also started later than you, it was not well mentioned. Even now, the biggest challenge, particularly when you are into enterprise products, is to essentially be part of the customer ecosystem, not just be with the customer and be part of the customer ecosystem. At least that's what me and my team face. So if that is something that you also face, because it's geographically and civilizationally different, and you also took some of those examples.
Sure.
How do you actually handle that for yourself, and how do you groom your team to handle that when when the engineering team is and operations team is also geographically, global?
Yeah. And this is a fact of life now, especially large enterprise. I mean, I worked, so one of the products I worked with had teams on the US East Coast, West Coast, in Amsterdam, India, and Australia. And virtually impossible to even get a conference call going with everyone. The time zones are just too far apart. So you have to work with individual groups, build consensus, do as much as you can over email. And now the world is fairly easy that way. There's so much of collaboration technology that's available. So interview your customers over Skype, send them emails. So there's this SaaS product called Groove. And so one of the interesting things that the Groove CEO does is every customer they onboard, the CEO personally sends an email to that customer. So just listening to your customers doesn't have to involve spending a lot of money and wining and dining them in 5-star hotels. No. You have a lot of communication channels available today. You have a lot of data. So one of the things that I do first thing in the morning is we have a support queue for our product. I personally monitor the support queue even now, even though it's the customer support function now. It's not even in the engineering team. But listening to your customer queue is a very, very powerful way of knowing what your customers want. So it's not about going and, so one of the perks of the PM role is going to user conferences and schmoozing with the key customers, and all that is good. But on a daily basis, spend at least, as Puneet said, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever you can carve out. Listen to your customers. There's so many data channels that are broadcasting that information back to you. Write a blog, invite some of your key customers to read it, be interactive on that. Use other social media, use email wisely. So, I email my top users all the time, and often enough, sometimes it leads to sticky situations where they say, look, we're unhappy with this, and I have no control over that for at least a few weeks or a few months. It's fine. They understand it's the reality of limited resources, limited time that everyone has. So as long as you're transparent in communicating that, they respect that, and it's all good.
Hi Parag, my name is Vinod, and you've mentioned how to deal with tough sales folks and tough engineering folks. Is there something that you've felt that this is a really great idea or a feature to build in, but you had difficulty in getting the buy-in from the top management? How do you go about it, especially when at times it's brand new and you don't have a lot of data to go about it?
Right. So best way is find a customer champion. And if a customer stands up and says, I'm willing to pay money to buy this, you're golden. And these days with agile development, if you can steal a few hours of an engineer's time, build a small proto, a minimum viable product, show it to the customer. So one of the successes I have personally experienced is doing skunkworks, especially in large enterprise, when managing the whole negotiation of budgeting and getting management on board takes time. And you can use that time wisely. So instead of waiting and chafing, saying that, oh, they're not allowing me to do this stuff, sell that dream to an engineer or two, see if they're willing to do it in their spare time, or if your company has the 80-20 time concept, buy their time from their manager. Build a small prototype, show it to a customer says, good, you're golden, and be prepared to learn. So again, experimentation is a lot of the times things that we thought were true turn out to be fairly different when we actually build and validate it with customers. So I would say at least 40-50% of the time, this validation itself will filter out things that make sure that you don't have to go negotiate this and then fail with top management later on. So you can actually take a proven concept and work with that. So I'll give you a tangible example. So we didn't have budget, we didn't have people to do a mobile extension of our value selling platform at Oracle. And so I just charmed, motivated, threatened, whatever, one engineer and said, look, 50% of your time now, next 2 months, just do this. So he did it, we showed it to a few power users. Then I got the power users to speak to their management, and their management then sent a message into my management saying, this is what we want. And then, of course, then it becomes my manager's idea. And so he says, Parag, this is what we should do. So again, I mean, so if you're not hung up about this is my idea, and you are hung up about this is what I want to do, there's many ways to get it done. Desire is the key. Okay, so we'll stop here. I'm sure everyone is hungry, so am I, but happy to interact over lunch.